Admiral Vexithera stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the strange readings on her screens. The massive ship moved through space toward a small yellow star. Around her, dozens of alien crew members worked at their stations. Their blue skin glowed softly under the ship lights. "Admiral," called her science officer, "the readings are getting stronger. Something is very wrong with this system." Vexithara nodded. The Galactic Dominion had ruled this part of space for thousands of years. They knew every planet, every star, every space rock. But the Sol system had gone dark 100 years ago. No signals came out. No ships went in or came out. It was like the whole system had disappeared. "Show me the planet called Earth," she ordered. The main screen lit up with an image that made everyone on the bridge go quiet. Earth was not the blue and green world their old records showed. Instead, it looked like a perfect silver ball covered in strange patterns. Huge structures floated around it, bigger than moons. Lines of light connected everything together. "What happened here?" whispered the navigation officer. Around Earth's sun, massive rings caught starlight and turned it into energy. The structures were so big they made the Dominion's greatest space stations look like toys. Whatever lived here now had completely changed their world. "Sir, we're getting a message," reported the communications officer. Her voice shook a little. "Put it through," Vexithera said. A human woman appeared on the screen. She had brown hair and kind eyes. She wore simple clothes and smiled like she was greeting an old friend. "Hello," she said in perfect galactic standard language. "My name is Commander Sarah Chen. Welcome to the Sol system." Vexithara felt confused. How did this human know their language? The old records said Earth people were primitive. They fought with metal weapons and burned fossil fuels. "I am Admiral Vexithera of the Galactic Dominion," she replied. "We came to check on this system. Our records show Earth was inhabited by a pre-space civilization." Sarah Chen laughed softly. "Your records are a bit out of date. We've made some changes since then." "Changes?" Vexithera looked at her science officer, who was staring at his readings with wide eyes. "Admiral," he whispered, "their energy output is impossible. They're using more power than our entire empire." Sarah seemed to hear him, even though the communication was supposed to be private. "Oh, we've gotten much better at using energy. We found some interesting things about how the universe really works." Vexithara felt a chill. "What kind of things?" "Well," Sarah said, "we discovered that the laws of physics are more like suggestions. Once you understand the basic code, you can make improvements." The bridge crew looked at each other with worry. Nobody talked about changing the laws of physics. That was impossible. "We demand an explanation," Vexithara said, trying to sound strong. "The Dominion rules this sector of space. You will submit to our authority." Sarah's smile never changed. "I understand you think that. But we've been watching your empire for quite some time. We know all about you. Impossible. Earth had no space travel when we last checked." "That's true, but watching doesn't require travel, Admiral. We learned to see through space and time about 50 years ago. It's quite useful." Vexithara's science officer was making worried sounds as he read his instruments. "Admiral, their technology. I can't understand any of these readings. It's like they're using science that doesn't exist." "May I show you something?" Sarah asked politely. Before Vexithera could answer, the space around their fleet began to change. Stars moved in the sky, but the ships didn't feel any movement. One moment they were near Earth's sun, the next moment they were floating above a planet covered in crystal cities. "This is Zephyria Prime," Sarah explained. "Your capital world. We thought you might want to get home quickly to report what you found." Vexithera stared at the planet below. The trip from Sol to Zephyria Prime took 3 months at their fastest speed. They had just traveled that distance in seconds. "How?" was all she could say. "Space is flexible if you know how to fold it," Sarah said. "Distance is just another variable you can change." The Admiral's navigation officer was checking his instruments over and over. "Sir, we are at Zephyria Prime. All the star patterns match. But this should be impossible." "Nothing is impossible," Sarah said gently. "You just have to expand your understanding of what's possible." Vexithera realized her hands were shaking. In all her years of commanding ships, she had never seen anything like this. The humans had moved an entire fleet across the galaxy like it was nothing. "What do you want from us?" she asked. "Nothing really. We just want to be left alone to continue our work. But we understand you might need to report this to your leaders. That's why we sent you home safely." "Your work?" Sarah looked thoughtful. "We're trying to understand consciousness itself, how thought creates reality, how beings can grow beyond what they think is possible. It's fascinating work. The science officer was now making small, frightened sounds. Admiral, according to these readings, each human on Earth has access to more energy than our entire battle fleet. Sarah heard him again. Energy is just another tool, like a hammer or a computer. Once you understand what it really is, you can use as much as you need. Vexithara felt like the universe had turned upside down. Everything the Dominion believed about technology, about power, about how things worked, was suddenly meaningless. "We should go," she said quietly to her crew. "Of course," Sarah agreed. "But before you leave, I have a small gift." A small cube appeared on Vexithara's command chair. It was perfectly smooth and seemed to glow with inner light. "This contains some basic information about what we've learned. Your scientists might find it interesting. Think of it as a friendly gesture between neighbors." Vexithara picked up the cube. It felt warm and seemed to pulse with life. "Why are you giving this to us?" Sarah's smile became even kinder. "Because learning should be shared. Everyone deserves the chance to grow and understand more about existence. Even empires that think they already know everything." The communication ended. Sarah Chen disappeared from their screen, leaving the Dominion fleet floating above their home planet. Vexithara stared at the cube in her hands and realized that everything had just changed. The humans were no longer the primitive species in their records. They had become something else entirely, something that could move fleets across space, change the laws of physics, and speak about consciousness like it was a science. "Set course for the palace," she ordered quietly. "The Emperor needs to know about this." As her ship moved toward the planet's surface, Vexithara wondered if the Galactic Dominion was about to meet something it could not conquer or control. For the first time in her military career, she was truly afraid. Emperor Zargotha slammed his fist on the crystal table. The sound echoed through the great hall where his war council sat. 20 of the Dominion's greatest military minds stared at the small cube that Admiral Vexithara had brought from Earth. "Impossible," the Emperor growled. His red eyes glowed with anger. "No species advances that quickly. Your report is full of lies." Vexithara stood straight even though she felt afraid. "Your Majesty, I saw it myself. They moved our entire fleet across the galaxy in seconds." "Tricks," said War Marshal Kethrin from across the table. He was the Dominion's greatest warrior, covered in battle scars. "Clever tricks to make us afraid. No species is more advanced than we are." Chief Scientist Naldrix held up the cube with shaking hands. His people were known for their intelligence, but even he looked confused. "Emperor, I have studied this device for 3 days. The technology inside is beyond our understanding." "Then you are not trying hard enough," Zargotha snapped. "We have conquered 1,000 worlds. We have weapons that can destroy stars. How can hairless apes from a backwater planet threaten us?" Naldrix activated a hologram above the table. Images and equations filled the air. The cube contains information about matter manipulation, energy conversion, and something they call consciousness physics. According to this data, they have learned to change reality by thinking about it. The War Council laughed. Reality could not be changed by thoughts. That was fantasy, not science. "Enough," the Emperor declared. "Ready the Grand Fleet. We will show these humans what real power looks like." War Marshal Kethrin smiled. The Grand Fleet was the largest military force in the galaxy. 5,000 warships, each one capable of destroying a planet. Millions of soldiers trained from birth to fight. Weapons that could tear holes in space itself. "It will be done, my Emperor," Kethrin said. "These humans will learn to fear the Dominion." 3 weeks later, the Grand Fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system. Kethrin stood on his command ship, a massive fortress covered in weapons. Around him, thousands of other ships waited for orders. "Show me Earth," he commanded. The planet appeared on his screen, still covered in silver structures and impossible technology. But something was different. Only one ship waited for them. It was small, no bigger than a fighter craft. It looked almost friendly, with smooth curves instead of weapons. "One ship?" laughed his second-in-command. "They send one tiny ship against the Grand Fleet?" A message came through their communications. A human man appeared on the screen. He had gray hair and wore simple clothes that looked comfortable. He smiled like he was meeting friends at a party. "Hello there," the human said. "I'm Dr. Marcus Webb. Welcome to our solar system. Sorry about the small reception committee, but most of our people are busy today." Kethrin scowled. "I am War Marshal Kethrin of the Galactic Dominion. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed." Dr. Webb looked surprised. "Oh my, that sounds quite serious. But I'm afraid surrender isn't really possible. You see, we don't actually have a government that could surrender. We're more of a collective learning project. What does that mean? Well, we all just try to understand the universe better. No rulers, no armies, no borders. Just people exploring what's possible. Catherine felt his anger growing. These humans were mocking the Dominion's power. You have 30 seconds to surrender or we open fire. Dr. Webb nodded thoughtfully. I understand you feel you need to demonstrate your strength. Would you like me to show you what we've learned instead? It might be more educational. Fire all weapons, Catherine shouted. Every ship in the Grand Fleet opened fire at once. Energy beams that could melt mountains shot toward the tiny human ship. Missiles that could crack moons filled the space between them. The combined firepower was enough to destroy entire star systems, but something strange happened. The weapons simply stopped moving. Thousands of energy beams froze in space like they were stuck in invisible ice. Missiles hung motionless halfway to their target. Even the light from the weapons seemed to pause. Dr. Webb's voice came through the communications again. Oh dear, that's quite a lot of firepower. You must have spent years building all these weapons. What did you do? Catherine demanded. His weapons control officer was pressing buttons frantically, but nothing worked. I just asked the universe to pause your attack for a moment, Dr. Webb explained. It's surprisingly cooperative once you learn to communicate with it properly. The War Marshal stared at his screens. Every reading showed that his weapons had simply stopped existing in normal space. They were still there, but they were no longer following the laws of physics. Impossible. Not impossible at all. Here, let me show you how it works. Dr. Webb's small ship moved toward Catherine's massive command vessel. As it got closer, something incredible happened. The ship began to change. Its metal hull started glowing and shifting. Parts of it became transparent. Other parts seemed to exist in more dimensions than should be possible. What you call matter, Dr. Webb explained, is really just energy arranged in specific patterns. Once you understand the patterns, you can rearrange them however you like. The command ship's hull began to change where the human ship touched it. Instead of metal and weapons, it became something beautiful. Crystal gardens grew across the surface. Flowers that glowed with their own light bloomed in the vacuum of space. Music came from somewhere, though there was no air to carry sound. Catherine and his crew found themselves standing in a garden that somehow existed inside their ship and outside it at the same time. They could breathe even though they were in space. They could hear birds singing, even though no birds lived in space. This is what's possible when you stop thinking of reality as fixed, Dr. Webb said. He was standing among them now, though his ship was still outside. Your ship is perfectly safe, by the way. I just wanted to show you something beautiful. The War Marshal tried to speak, but no words came. Everything he knew about science, about technology, about how things worked, had just been proven wrong. How? He finally whispered, practice mostly, and a willingness to accept that the universe is much stranger and more wonderful than we originally thought. With a gentle gesture, Dr. Webb returned everything to normal. The garden disappeared. The ship was metal again. The frozen weapons vanished harmlessly. I should let you get back to your duties, he said kindly. But before you go, I'd like to give your scientists something to think about. A small cube appeared on Catherine's command chair, just like the one Admiral Vexthera had received. This one has some basic information about energy manipulation and matter conversion. Nothing too advanced, but it should keep your people busy for a few hundred years. Dr. Webb's image began to fade. Oh, and War Marshal? You might want to tell your Emperor that conquest isn't really necessary anymore. There are much more interesting things to do with one's time. The communication ended. The human ship disappeared not by moving away, but by simply ceasing to be there. Catherine stared at the cube in his hands. His entire fleet, the most powerful military force in galactic history, had been stopped by one man in a small ship. Not destroyed, not defeated in battle, but simply made irrelevant. For the first time in his long military career, the War Marshal felt truly helpless. These humans were not just advanced, they had become something beyond what the Dominion could understand or fight. Set course for home, he ordered quietly. The Emperor needs to know that we are no longer the strongest power in the galaxy. Chief Scientist Naldrix had not slept in 7 days. His laboratory was filled with smoking equipment and broken machines. The second cube from the human sat on his desk, glowing softly like it was laughing at him. Around him, his best researchers lay on the floor or sat in corners, staring at nothing. Some were crying. Others made small whimpering sounds when they looked at the equations on the walls. "Sir," whispered his assistant, Dr. Vektal, "perhaps we should stop. This knowledge, it's not meant for minds like ours." Naldrich shook his head. His eyes were red from staring at impossible formulas. "The Emperor demands answers. These humans claim they can change reality by thinking about it. We must understand how." He activated another hologram from the cube. Mathematical symbols filled the air, describing how consciousness could affect matter at the quantum level. The equations made sense for about 3 seconds, then Naldrich's mind started hurting. "Look at this," he said to his team. "They describe reality as a computer program. They say the universe is running on some kind of cosmic software, and if you understand the programming language, you can edit it." Dr. Vektal looked at the equations and immediately started shaking. That would mean everything we know is wrong. Physics, chemistry, biology, all of it is just surface-level appearance. Worse than wrong, Naldrich realized. It means we're like insects trying to understand how televisions work. We see the pretty pictures but have no idea about the electronics behind them. Another researcher, Dr. Zixfon, crawled over from his corner. He had been the Dominion's expert on energy weapons, but now he looked broken. "I calculated their power output," he whispered. "Each human on Earth has access to more energy than our entire empire produces in a year. And there are billions of them." Naldrich felt something cold in his stomach. "Are you certain?" "I checked the numbers 1,000 times. They're using the energy output of stars like we use battery packs. And according to this data, that's just their basic daily consumption." The door to the laboratory burst open. Emperor Zargotha strode in, his royal guards behind him. His face was twisted with rage. "Enough," he roared. "I don't care what your instruments say. I don't care what their cubes contain. We are mobilizing every ship in the Dominion, every soldier, every weapon. We will crush these upstart humans." Naldrich stood on shaking legs. "Your Majesty, I don't think you understand. These beings have transcended normal physical laws. They've become something like gods." The Emperor grabbed the scientist by his collar. "There are no gods. Only the strong and the weak. Only those who rule and those who serve. But the evidence is what I say it is." Zargotha threw Naldrich against the wall. "Ready every ship we have. Call back every fleet from the outer territories. I want every weapon in the Dominion pointed at Earth." Dr. Vektal stepped forward carefully. "Sir, with respect, we estimate they could disable our entire military with a thought. Fighting them would be suicide," the Emperor finished. "Good. Then we die with honor rather than live as slaves." Meanwhile, on Earth, life continued peacefully. In what used to be New York City, children played games that involved reshaping small portions of space-time. They laughed as they created tiny pocket dimensions where different physical laws applied. Captain Elena Rodriguez sat in a coffee shop that existed in folded space, allowing customers to enjoy views of both Earth and distant galaxies. She was reading reports about the Dominion's military buildup with mild interest. "They're really planning to attack us," she mentioned to her friend Dr. James Park, who was growing flowers that bloomed in 11 dimensions. "How many ships?" James asked, not looking up from his gardening. "About 50 billion, according to our observations. They're pulling forces from across their entire empire." James considered this while a flower sang a beautiful song in colors that had no names. "That's quite a lot. Should we do something about it?" Elena shrugged. "I suppose we should discuss it. Want to call a town meeting?" An hour later, several thousand humans gathered in what used to be the Atlantic Ocean. The space had been converted into a beautiful amphitheater that could hold as many people as needed by expanding into comfortable pocket dimensions. Elena stood at the center, addressing the crowd. "So the Galactic Dominion is sending their entire military to attack us. What should we do?" A teenager raised her hand. "Can't we just move their ships somewhere safe? Maybe to a nice solar system where they can't hurt anyone?" "We could," agreed an elderly man who was simultaneously existing in 7 different time periods. "But that might not help them learn anything." A middle-aged woman who specialized in consciousness research spoke up. "I think they're afraid. Their entire worldview is based on conquest and control. When they met us, it challenged everything they believe." "So what do we do with scared bullies?" asked a child who was casually juggling small stars. Dr. Webb materialized in the center of the group. He had been exploring the outer dimensions but popped back to join the discussion. "We could try teaching them," he suggested. Show them that there are better ways to exist than through domination. Elena nodded. Teaching is good, but they're bringing 50 billion warships. That's a lot of negative energy to deal with. A young man who studied quantum psychology had an idea. What if we turn their attack into a learning experience? Convert their aggression into curiosity? The crowd murmured approval. This sounded like an interesting project. All in favor of the educational approach? Elena asked. Every hand went up, along with some tentacles from the humans who had temporarily modified their physical forms for convenience. Wonderful. Dr. Webb, since you handled the last contact so well, would you mind taking point on this? Webb smiled. I'd be happy to. Should be fun. As the meeting broke up, the humans began making preparations. Not weapons or defenses, but something far more powerful. They started preparing the greatest educational experience the galaxy had ever seen. Meanwhile, in his palace on Zephyria Prime, Emperor Zargotha stood before a holographic display showing his assembled fleet. 50 billion ships floated in formation, ready for the largest military operation in galactic history. Tomorrow, we show these humans what happens when they mock the Dominion, he declared to his generals. None of them mentioned that they were all terrified. None of them talked about the reports of humans casually manipulating reality like it was clay. None of them discussed the growing panic spreading through their empire as word of humanity's power spread. They were the Galactic Dominion. They had conquered everything they had ever encountered. Surely these humans, no matter how advanced, could not stand against the combined might of the greatest empire in the galaxy, War Marshal. Catherine stared out at the massive fleet and tried to convince himself that 50 billion ships could overcome beings who treated the laws of physics like suggestions deep in his heart. He knew they were about to encounter something that would change everything forever. The largest military force in galactic history approached the Sol system. 50 billion warships moved in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready. Emperor Zargotha commanded from his personal dreadnought. A ship so massive it had its own gravity. Show me Earth, he ordered from his throne room. The main screen displayed the silver planet, still surrounded by impossible structures. But something seemed different today. Humans could be seen going about normal activities, completely ignoring the approaching armada. Children played in Earth's rings, which apparently had been built sometime last week for fun. Adults tended gardens that grew in the vacuum of space. They're not even defending themselves, growled War Marshal Catherine. They mock us by pretending we don't exist. Good, the Emperor replied. Their arrogance will be their downfall. Admiral Vexthara felt sick to her stomach. She remembered her encounter with the humans, remembered how easily they had moved her fleet across the galaxy, but she had been ordered to participate in this attack and she could not disobey. All ships report ready, Your Majesty, announced the fleet coordinator. Emperor Zargotha stood from his throne. This was the moment he had been preparing for. The moment the Dominion would show the galaxy that no one could challenge their power. Fire everything, he commanded. 50 billion warships opened fire simultaneously. The combined weapons barrage was beyond imagination. Energy beams that could melt planets filled the space around Earth. Missiles that could shatter moons flew in perfect coordination. The attack contained enough destructive power to obliterate entire solar systems. The Emperor smiled as he watched the deadly light show racing toward Earth. No defense could stop this much firepower. The humans would be vaporized instantly, but then something impossible happened. The massive energy barrage reached Earth and simply disappeared. Not deflected, not blocked, but absorbed, as if the planet was drinking the attack like water. What happened? Zargotha demanded. Where did our weapons go? Before anyone could answer, a familiar voice spoke from every speaker in the fleet. Hello again, said Dr. Webb cheerfully. Thank you for that impressive light show. We used the energy to power our coffee machines this morning. Very thoughtful of you. The Emperor spun around, looking for the source of the voice. On every screen in his throne room, Dr. Webb appeared. He was standing in space wearing casual clothes, somehow present on every ship in the fleet at the same time. How are you doing this? Zargotha shouted. Doing what? Oh, you mean existing in multiple places at once? That's fairly basic once you understand that location is just another variable you can adjust. War Marshal Catherine was checking his instruments frantically. Sir, he's actually here. On every ship. But also not here. The readings don't make sense, Dr. Webb smiled kindly. I'm afraid your instruments aren't designed to detect post-physical consciousness. But don't worry, I'm not here to harm anyone. Actually, I thought this might be a good time for a lesson. A lesson? The Emperor snarled. We are the Galactic Dominion. We don't take lessons from anyone. Oh, but learning is the most wonderful thing in the universe, Dr. Webb replied. And I think you'll find this quite educational. The space around the entire fleet began to change. Stars rearranged themselves into comfortable patterns. The harsh vacuum of space became breathable and warm. Most incredibly, every soldier and officer in the 50 billion ships found themselves sitting at comfortable desks that somehow fit perfectly inside their ships while also existing in a vast classroom that stretched across light years. Welcome to physics. Handwantorn Post-Singularity Edition, Dr. Webb announced. He now stood at the front of the impossible classroom with teaching materials that existed in dimensions the Dominion forces couldn't normally see. I object to this. Emperor Zargotha tried to stand from his desk but found he was genuinely interested in staying to hear what Dr. Webb had to say. Let's start with the basics, Dr. Webb continued, ignoring the Emperor's protests. What you call reality is actually a very sophisticated information system. Think of it as a computer program running on hardware you can't see. Holographic equations appeared above every desk. Unlike the painful mathematics in the cubes, these somehow made sense to everyone watching. Even soldiers who had never studied science found themselves understanding complex concepts about the nature of existence. The beings in your empire have been like people watching television, Dr. Webb explained patiently. You see the pictures on the screen, but you don't understand the electronics that make it work. We learned to see the electronics. Admiral Vexithera found herself raising her hand. But how is it possible to change the programming? Excellent question. Dr. Webb beamed. It turns out consciousness is not produced by brains. Consciousness is the fundamental force that creates reality. Your brains are more like radio receivers, picking up the consciousness signals and translating them into experience. He gestured, and suddenly everyone could see the quantum field that underlies all matter. It looked like an ocean of light, with waves and currents that responded to observation and intention. Once you understand that consciousness shapes reality at the quantum level, you can learn to do it deliberately. That's how we change matter, manipulate energy, and fold space. A Dominion general raised his hand. But this means everything we've built our civilization on is wrong. Not wrong, Dr. Webb corrected gently. Just incomplete. You've been doing excellent work with the surface layer of reality, but there are so many more layers to explore. The lesson continued for hours. Dr. Webb covered topics like consciousness transfer, multidimensional thinking, matter-energy conversion, and the ethics of cosmic-level power. The strangest part was that everyone was enjoying it. Soldiers who had expected to die in glorious battle found themselves fascinated by discussions of quantum consciousness. But why are you teaching us this? Asked War Marshal Kethrin. We came here to destroy you. Dr. Webb looked sad for the first time. Because you're in pain. All of you. Your entire civilization is built on fear and the need to control others. That kind of existence hurts even when you're winning. Emperor Zargotha felt something strange in his chest. For a moment he remembered what it felt like to wonder about things, to be curious instead of angry. We're not weak, he said, but his voice lacked its usual force. Of course you're not weak. You built an empire spanning thousands of worlds. That takes incredible strength and intelligence. But imagine what you could build if you used that strength to create instead of conquer. Dr. Webb gestured again, and suddenly everyone could see possibilities. They saw worlds where different species worked together to explore the mysteries of existence. They saw technologies that enhanced life instead of destroying it. They saw what their civilizations could become if they chose cooperation over domination. The universe is so much bigger and more wonderful than any of us originally thought, Dr. Webb said softly. There's room for everyone to grow and explore and become more than they ever imagined. The lesson ended gradually. The impossible classroom faded, and the Dominion forces found themselves back on their ships. But something had changed in all of them. They had seen beyond their old understanding of what was possible. Emperor Zargotha sat on his throne, staring at his hands. For the first time in centuries, he wasn't thinking about conquest or power. He was thinking about what Dr. Webb had shown them, about consciousness and creation and the possibility of becoming something better. Your Majesty, Admiral Vexithera said quietly. What are your orders? The Emperor looked around his throne room, seeing it with new eyes. All the weapons, all the symbols of power and fear, they seemed small now compared to what the humans had achieved. I need to think, he said finally. Across the fleet, similar conversations were happening. Soldiers and officers who had come to fight found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew about strength, about purpose, about what made life worth living. The greatest military force in galactic history hung motionless in space, not defeated by weapons but transformed by understanding. 3 months after the Great Lesson, the Galactic Dominion was falling apart, not from war or invasion but from something much more powerful: enlightenment. On the industrial world of Kepler 442b, factory workers had stopped making weapons and started growing gardens that bloomed in impossible colors. The planet's governor, General Thaxtor, found himself more interested in studying consciousness than enforcing imperial law. "Sir," his aide reported nervously, 17 more worlds have declared independence this week. They're calling themselves learning collectives and requesting human teachers. General Thaxtor nodded absently. He was reading one of the human books that had somehow appeared in every library across the Empire. This one was about how plants communicate through quantum fields. "Let them go," he said. "We can't force people to stop growing." Similar scenes played out across thousands of worlds. The rigid military hierarchy that had held the Dominion together was crumbling as beings realized that force was ultimately meaningless when consciousness itself could be expanded and shared. On Zephyria Prime, Emperor Zargotha paced in his throne room. His advisors had abandoned him one by one, all of them choosing to pursue higher understanding instead of serving his empire. Even his personal guards had left to start a philosophical discussion group. "This is intolerable," he muttered to himself. "I am the Emperor. I rule through strength and fear. These humans have destroyed everything I built." But even as he spoke, he felt the change happening in his own mind. Dr. Webb's lesson had planted seeds of curiosity that were growing despite his attempts to ignore them. He found himself wondering about things he had never questioned before. What was the point of ruling if ruling made everyone miserable? What would it feel like to create something beautiful instead of conquering something that already existed? "No," he said firmly. "I am still the Emperor. I will show these humans that some things cannot be changed by pretty words and impossible lessons." He activated his personal communicator and sent a message to Earth. "Humans of Sol System, I am Emperor Zargotha, rightful ruler of this galaxy. I challenge you to single combat. Send your greatest warrior to face me. If I win, you will serve the Dominion. If you win, we will discuss terms." The response came quickly. A young girl appeared on his screen. She had pigtails and was holding a stuffed animal. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. "Hi," she said brightly. "I'm Jenny Park. I got picked for show and tell today, so I get to talk to you." Zargotha stared at the screen in confusion. "What is this mockery? I demanded to face your greatest warrior." "Oh, we don't really have warriors anymore," Jenny explained patiently, "but I'm really good at show and tell." "Want to see my pet?" She held up the stuffed animal, which Zargotha now realized was moving on its own and seemed to be made of crystallized starlight. "I don't understand," the Emperor said. "I challenged you to combat." Jenny looked puzzled. "Why would we want to fight? Fighting is kind of silly when you can just help people feel better instead." "Because I am the Emperor. I am the strongest being in the galaxy." "That sounds lonely," Jenny said with genuine sympathy. "Being the strongest means everyone else is afraid of you. That must be really sad." Something cracked in Zargotha's chest. For just a moment he remembered being young before he became Emperor, when he had friends who weren't afraid of him. I don't want to be sad," he whispered. "Then don't be," Jenny said happily. "Here, let me show you something." She reached toward the screen and somehow her small hand emerged from the communication device. Before Zargotha could react, she gently touched his forehead. Instantly, everything changed. The pain he had carried for centuries vanished. The anger that had driven him to conquer worlds melted away. The fear that had made him need to control everyone and everything simply disappeared. For the first time in his very long life, Emperor Zargotha felt peaceful. "How?" he asked, tears streaming down his face. "I just asked your sadness to go away," Jenny explained. "It didn't want to hurt you anymore either. It was just scared and didn't know what else to do." Zargotha collapsed into his throne, sobbing, not from pain now, but from relief. He had spent so long being angry and afraid that he had forgotten what it felt like to simply exist without fighting. What do I do now? He asked. Whatever makes you happy, Jenny said. What did you like to do before you became emperor? He had to think for a long time. I used to like growing flowers. Small ones with blue petals. I had a garden when I was young. That sounds wonderful. You should grow flowers again. I bet you'd be really good at it. Jenny's image began to fade, but her voice remained kind and clear. Remember, you don't have to be the strongest anymore. You can just be yourself. After she was gone, Zargotha sat alone in his empty throne room. Outside his windows, he could see the gardens that had once surrounded the palace before he had them destroyed to build weapon factories. He stood up slowly and walked outside. In the corner of what had been a magnificent garden, he found a small patch of soil that the construction crews had missed. Using his hands, he began to dig. For the first time in centuries, the Emperor of the Galactic Dominion was planting flowers. 1 year later, Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on a platform that floated peacefully in Earth's upper atmosphere. Below her, thousands of former Dominion worlds had reorganized themselves into learning collectives. Each world was pursuing its own path to understanding, with humans serving as teachers and guides when requested. The former military fleets had been converted into exploration vessels. Instead of conquering new worlds, they now searched for new forms of life to learn from and share knowledge with. Dr. Webb materialized beside her, carrying a report from the outer territories. How are our former enemies doing? Elena asked. Wonderfully, Webb replied. Former War Marshal Kethrin has become quite an accomplished poet. His verses about the nature of consciousness are surprisingly moving. And the Emperor? Webb smiled. He's become the galaxy's most renowned flower breeder. His blue roses can grow in 11 dimensions simultaneously and sing the most beautiful songs. He's teaching gardening classes to anyone who's interested. Elena nodded with satisfaction. And the rest of the galaxy? Learning, growing, discovering that cooperation produces much more interesting results than conquest ever did. She looked out at the stars, where new civilizations were making contact every day. Instead of being conquered or forced to join an empire, they were welcomed into a growing community of conscious beings, all working together to understand the mysteries of existence. You know what the best part is? Elena said. What's that? We didn't conquer them. We didn't rule them. We just showed them that there were better ways to be alive, and they chose those ways for themselves. Dr. Webb nodded. That's the real secret, isn't it? True power isn't the ability to force others to do what you want. True power is helping others discover what they really want to do. In the distance, a ship arrived from the Andromeda Galaxy. Its crew was eager to learn about consciousness physics and to share their own discoveries about the nature of joy. Soon, there would be another celebration of knowledge, another expansion of understanding. The galaxy was no longer ruled by fear and force. Instead, it had become a vast classroom where every being was both student and teacher, all of them working together to explore the infinite possibilities of conscious existence. And in a small garden on what used to be the imperial capital, a former emperor tended his flowers and smiled at the beauty he had learned to create instead of destroy.